Boba Fett, the man, the myth, the Mandalorian, the myth-DeLorean. Simultaneously regarded as one of the coolest characters in cinematic history and one of, if not the most overhyped. But, is he overhyped? Hi, I'm Jordan. Welcome to the show, wherein I tell you why Boba Fett actually is a badass, and I do it without referencing the expanded universe. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with the topic, either because you were born yesterday or you've been living under a rock, Boba Fett is regarded as overhyped because he really doesn't do much of anything except stand around and look cool until falling into an uncomfortably fleshy hole in the sand. However, that is simply not an accurate description. He fires his blaster a couple times, then he flies around with his jetpack, then he briefly inconveniences Luke, and then he falls into an uncomfortably fleshy hole in the sand. Okay, it's easy to understand why Boba Fett is regarded as overhyped, because at a surface level, he doesn't really seem to do much. To understand him better as a character both on-screen and within the Star Wars universe, we need to go back and take a quick look at his origins. Originally designed as a super stormtrooper or an Imperial super commando, George Lucas liked the Boba Fett character design so much he rewrote him as a bounty hunter to give him a greater story. Then the all-white Imperial armor aesthetic was swapped out for the gritty green one we know today, and the rest is history. If Boba Fett was rewritten to have a greater story, why was our favorite bounty hunter met with such an abrupt and fleshy demise? According to Craig Miller, Lucasfilm's first official fan relations officer, Boba was going to be the main villain. That was set up why he was taking Han Solo away. When George decided not to make a third trilogy, he completely jettisoned that storyline. From the word go, Boba was designed to be a threat on par with Darth Vader. In fact, one of the original endings for the trilogy was going to see our heroes from a galaxy far, far away going toe-to-toe, mano a Mandalorian, with Boba Fett. However, the final fight with Fett storyline was dropped in favor of the storyline we saw in Return of the Jedi, which is why, according to Craig Miller, now that we have a better understanding of his character and his origins, let's jump in. From here on out, there will be no source material referenced except for the on-screen events of the original trilogy and any reasonable deductions we can make from those events. To begin, let's take a look at what was happening when Boba first arrived on the scene in Empire Strikes Back. After our heroes successfully elude Imperial pursuit inside an asteroid field, Darth Vader brings in an assortment of bounty hunters to track down and capture the crew of the Millennium Falcon. And from what we've seen of Darth Vader, this is kind of a big deal. Vader doesn't really seem to trust anybody, not even high-ranking Imperial military officers, and let's be honest, bounty hunters and hired guns aren't exactly the most trustworthy lot. There also seems to be a general disdain for the bounty hunters from the Imperial officers, with Admiral Piet commenting,
"Bounty hunters? We don't need that scum."
This could be a case of simple snobbery, or it could be a case of wounded pride because Darth Vader has brought in specialists to handle a job that, so far, the Imperial Navy hasn't been capable of doing. Either way, it's pretty clear that Darth Vader is the one who hired the bounty hunters, and I think that says a lot about his confidence in their skills. As Darth Vader is briefing the bounty hunters on the mission, he stops in front of Boba to specify that it is a live capture mission. Specifically, he says,
"No disintegrations."
And Boba replies with a flippant,
"As you wish."
This could be interpreted as Darth Vader telling Boba Fett not to botch this job like he botched some other job. But that ignores a few key characteristics of Darth Vader. First off,
"You have failed me for the last time, Admiral. You are in command now, Admiral Piet."
Darth Vader doesn't respond well to failure from his subordinates, so it's highly unlikely that Darth Vader would bring Boba Fett back in if Boba Fett had screwed a job up so badly last time that he had melted somebody he was supposed to bring in alive. Second, Vader absolutely needs Han and Leia to work as bait for his plan to capture Luke Skywalker. So if Boba Fett were some
"shoot first, questions are for pussies"
kind of bounty hunter, Darth Vader wouldn't let him within 12 parsecs of this job. See what I did there? The film doesn't give us an in-universe explanation as to why Darth Vader feels the need to tell Boba specifically no disintegrations, but it does a great job of setting up this idea that Boba is incredibly dangerous. Maybe the title of this video shouldn't be why Boba Fett actually is a badass. maybe it should be why you should be afraid of Boba Fett because he's right behind you. Oh god, run. Oh, too late. He reduced you to your constituent atoms. My takeaway from this interaction is that Darth Vader realizes, whatever their past differences may or may not be, that Boba Fett has a skill set and a talent pool that he would be a fool to ignore. And beyond that, I think Darth Vader actually respects Boba. There's more evidence that points to that, and we'll get to that later as we go through. Smash cut to Han docking the Millennium Falcon on the back of the Star Destroyer Avengers command tower, the final demise of poor Captain Nita, and then the Falcon drifting away with the rest of the garbage. Our heroes are in the clear, and oh no, who's that? Despite Han's incredibly clever maneuver fooling the entire Imperial fleet, Boba Fett is still right there and waiting for him. How did Boba know to look for Han and the Millennium Falcon by the Avenger? And how do I know that it's called the Avenger? Aside from reading a lot of Wikipedia articles in my free time.
Sir, we have a priority signal from the Star Destroyer Avenger.
Right.
That's how. And then you add this scene in.
My lord, we have them.
And from there, it's not much of a deductive stretch to figure out that the Millennium Falcon is right by the Star Destroyer Avenger. So why didn't any of the other bounty hunters pick up on this? They were right there, and several of them were even closer to Piet when he got this message. I mean, Bosk was basically standing on the guy's head. So why didn't they pick up on this, and why didn't they go look by the Avenger for the Millennium Falcon? Because they weren't listening. Even with Darth Vader marching back and forth in front of him and waving a finger in his face, Boba Fett was present enough to know to listen to the bridge crew for clues and tips as to what was going on in the hunt. However, we still don't have an answer to the question of, how did Boba Fett know to wait and hide among the garbage for Han Solo to reveal himself? Yes, Boba knew about the Avenger connection, but you know who else knew about the Avenger connection? The entire Imperial fleet. So, how does Boba know where to find the Millennium Falcon when the Imperial fleet doesn't? I have no idea. Honestly, I've thought it through and I can't think of a reasonable explanation. Unless Boba overheard some bridge crew talking about the interaction between the Millennium Falcon and the Avenger and how they thought the Millennium Falcon had a cloaking device, and then Boba realized that that was kind of stupid because no ship that small has a cloaking device, and then he thought about Imperial Star Destroyers and how their sensors have a minimum range, and how a canny pilot could duck inside that minimum sensor range and get right in there and dock on the back and hide in plain sight, and Boba, being clever, would have known that. Except I can't use any of that, because that completely violates our rule of only using evidence that's seen on screen. However, Boba Fett effectively pulled off the same maneuver Han Solo did, except he did it under much more difficult circumstances, and that's a big tally in the he's a badass column. Han pulled off his disappearing act in front of one Star Destroyer that was separated from the rest of the fleet. Boba pulled off a similar maneuver, except Boba did it in front of the assembled Imperial fleet. We may not have an answer as to how Boba knew exactly where he needed to wait, but we do know that he successfully hid his ship there. It's reasonable to assume that any military vessel, like an Imperial Star Destroyer, would be monitoring civilian traffic in its airspace, or space, as it might be in this case. Somebody would have noticed Boba Fett poking around the Avengers aft end unless he was doing it stealthily. Boba had an invitation to get in to meet with Darth Vader to discuss the mission, but that invitation was likely just to get him on the ship. It probably didn't give him free rein to fly around the Imperial fleet. So, if Boba had just been blatantly nosing around Star Destroyers, a military organization like the Imperial Navy would probably respond in one of two ways. The first way, demanding that he vacate their area of operations or be fired upon. The second way they might respond is they would just start looking where Boba is looking. The first scenario sees Boba either chased off or dead, and either way, he's gonna lose Han's trail in the process. The second scenario sees the Empire potentially finding where Han is hiding and capturing him, and therefore ensuring that Boba doesn't get the bounty, because the Empire's not gonna pay Boba Fett if they catch him themselves. Once again, I have no idea how he did it. However, from what we see on screen, and from the deductions we can make from what we've seen on screen, it's clear that Boba managed to evade the collective sensors of every Imperial vessel present. And the best part is, he didn't just fool the Imperial fleet, he fooled Han Solo, and he outmaneuvered him. And Han Solo is not someone that is easily fooled or outmaneuvered. Fast forward to Cloud City and the most uncomfortable dinner party ever, and oh! Who's that next to Vader? This scene falls under the whole Vader respects Boba thing I mentioned earlier. Boba gets invited to dinner is a little self-explanatory in that regard, so we're gonna skim past it. Instead, there's two scenes we're gonna discuss, and for simplicity's sake, we're gonna lump them together. The first scene happens in the hallway outside the room where Han Solo is being tortured. The second scene happens in the carbon freezing chamber just before Han is frozen. In both scenes, Boba is raising a complaint to Darth Vader.
He's no good to me dead. What if he doesn't survive? He's worth a lot to me.
And in both scenes, after Boba complains, Darth Vader placates him.
He will not be permanently damaged. The Empire will compensate you if he dies.
Time out. Darth Vader does what? What have we seen from Darth Vader up to this point in the Star Wars trilogy that makes us think that placating people is something that Darth Vader does? Everything we've seen tells us that Darth Vader gives pretty much everyone except the Emperor the same ultimatum. Do what I say, or else. This is backed up by what happens after Boba makes each complaint when Lando steps in to make a complaint.
That was never a condition of our agreement, nor was giving hand to this bounty hunter. You said they'd be left in the city under my supervision.
And how does Darth Vader respond to Lando's complaints?
Perhaps you think you're being treated unfairly? I am altering the deal. Pray I don't alter it any further.
Lando gets mocked or threatened, and Boba gets placated. This special treatment seems to be reserved exclusively for Boba Fett. So why does Darth Vader give Boba Fett special treatment? Let's recap what we know about Darth Vader. He's a cold-blooded killer, and he'll use violence or the threat of violence with little to no provocation. Vader is not only violent, he is proficiently violent. He's an exceptional warrior who is rightly given the majority of the credit for the eradication of the Jedi. He's temperamental, and he's mean as hell. Who does a person like Vader make the effort to placate? It would have to be someone who is easier to placate than they are to fight. Someone who could cause enough problems for Darth Vader that the most practical course of action is diplomacy rather than violence. Someone who is themselves a cold-blooded killer, proficiently violent, and an exceptional warrior. Someone like Boba Fett. It's spelled out in the way he treats Boba versus the way he treats everybody else. It's like how you knew who each teacher's favorite student was, or how you know which of your siblings is the favorite child. When you are far and away the best at your job, you make that job look effortless. You make it look like you're just standing around. Boba Fett is a badass. Just ignore this part. That's all from me for now, so until next time, thanks for watching.